Hello my friends and welcome back. Thank you very much for being with me again today. About 7 topics for this video. Some topics are related to the new developments in the Middle East, Israel's attacks on Beirut, the Hezbollah killed about 8 Israeli troops that invaded Lebanon, Iran threatens any country that would allow Israel to fly over, so opens its airspace to Israel. Iran will consider those enemy states, therefore will retaliate. Zelensky calls out the double standard for the same group, which is the Western baboons are actively shooting down Russian Iranian missiles for Israel, but they won't hit the Russian missiles over Ukraine. What's that all about? Well, I tell you, the Russians have nuclear weapons. That's one of the main reasons why it's this double standard. Then we have the Russians who, as I said, took their gloves off when they realized finally that these guys are about to take care of them, and they are invading Africa. And they're kicking out the neo-colonialist power called Al Capone and its little vassal losers that lost their colonies because they could. Anyway, these are some of the articles I'm going to discuss here. I'm also going to discuss an article coming from Bloomberg to show you how sneaky, but not that sneaky, these guys shape public opinion. They will use certain words for some, other kind of words for others. And Israel, this is another, how should I call it, to be proper for YouTube, weasel way of telling, hey, I'm gonna hit that town, civilians should evacuate. If they don't evacuate, not my fault. They did the same thing in Gaza. Now they call southern Lebanon. They say, hey, guys in southern Lebanon, evacuate because we're coming over. And if you don't, not my mistake. If someone comes to your town today and says, hey, you got to evacuate because we're about to do some damage here. And you're going to say, okay, I'm leaving my town and I'm going to come back. Never. All right. Do you think the Israelis will, if they conquer territory in Lebanon, do you think they will give it back? Well, if we look by patterns, then look how they gave back the territories after the 1967, right? The UN Resolution 242 mandates that, but they ignore it. Why? Because they can. All right, let's start with the first piece of news here. Russia Today. Russia to expand diplomatic presence in Africa. This is the gloves-off approach by the Russians in South America, Asia, and Africa. Moscow plans to open embassies in Niger, Sierra Leone, and South Sudan, the Russian Foreign Ministry has said. So Russia is actively working to increase its diplomatic presence in Africa with plans to establish embassies in the countries mentioned above. So an embassy is not one that has only diplomatic connections and contacts with the country. The embassy is a refuge and a springboard for your intelligence services. Any country that has interest in another country will have a little mission over there. They will infiltrate the territory of that country that is at interest or of interest for the country that opens an embassy. So the fact that these guys are opening an embassy is not to talk to and have, cultural exchange, blah, 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 blah. It's to have diplomatic staff that has different kind of missions. They all do that. All right, so look at those 3 countries I mentioned, Niger, Sierra Leone, and South Sudan, and they might have some, regime change all of a sudden. There will be some spontaneous demonstrations activated by the guys who are losing the presence in Africa. My African brothers, you should be independent. But sometimes you have to, how should I put it, cooperate with stronger countries to protect yourselves from other strong countries. Unfortunately, especially if you have natural resources, then you are going to be a target of the big guys who want those. So see who's going to treat you better, unfortunately, and stick with those guys. Try to have an equal partnership if you can. All right, that's the first article. The second article is Iran's warning towards everyone, every state, any state providing airspace to Israel is going to be considered an enemy. So Iran will consider any state providing airspace to Israel as enemy, foreign ministers said. Iran top diplomat expressed hope that no one will give such a permission. And this is according to the Iranians. More than 90% of our missiles reached their targets and were not intercepted. We have already told representatives of other countries that we will consider an enemy anyone who provides their airspace to Israel. But I hope that no one will give such permission. Iranian news agency SNN quoted Araghchi as saying. So let's see, what are we talking about? Where is that? Right here. So here is the Middle East. We have Iran here. We have Israel here. We have poor Lebanon here. All right. And in order for Israel to strike Iran, which is Tehran is right here, they have to cross over Jordan, maybe go over Saudi Arabia, maybe Kuwait, maybe just around the Persian Gulf, maybe Iraq, Syria. So they would go through these things. Turkey, I don't think they would go over, but it's going to be probably Syria, Iraq, and they go in. That's the most likely route. Or Jordan, which are vassal states of the United States of America, unfortunately, and can go through Jordan, Iraq, Iran. I don't think the Saudi Arabia will be involved. I have another article discussing the so-called Gulf Cooperation Council. I think that's how it's called. They are talking about, hey, ceasefire, we support Lebanon. The only country really supporting Lebanon is this right here. The other ones are just blah, 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 blah. So let's look over Israel. Calls for evacuation from South Lebanon. Strikes central Beirut. So they call for evacuation from South Lebanon. What does that mean? The same thing they did in Gaza. They said, you know what, guys? You are very much over there, confined to that little piece of land. 2-point-some million people. We're going to go after some bad dudes. So therefore, we're going to just strike the bad dudes, and if you don't evacuate, you could become victims. So how about you don't do that? How about you do it, how they call it, surgically? No. When the Russians are doing their destruction, oh my God, these guys, they hide, and I saw this in Gaza. Well, we told you to evacuate, and you didn't. But once you evacuate, you won't come back. That's my assessment. So the fact that you tell that house, guys, you evacuate because I'm about to go in and do something, and if you don't go out and you become a collateral victim or collateral damage, as they like to call it, depending on who's the victim, then I'm all safe. I'm all good. I'm in self-defense, as you know. Therefore, you should just move out. And I'm going to take the land. Clip. All right. Like Golan Heights and others. Next one. This is a baboon article coming from Bloomberg. What do you expect? Bloomberg is, yes, Bloomberg. Israel hits Beirut as world awaits its response against Iran. So it just responds to Iran being, the bad dudes here. And I'm just going to read a few sentences to make a point. Israeli warplanes bombed Beirut and traded hostilities with Hezbollah's fighters in southern Lebanon. So from the very beginning, Israel is not fighting Lebanon. No, it's fighting the bad guys, Hezbollah. All right? But remember, the fact that you designate some group as your enemy who resides in another country does not give you the right to go and invade. Because if that would be the case, then, for instance, the Indians should be allowed to go to Canada and attack with military force some people who call for breaking up India and are designated as terrorist organizations and so on, which they don't. Why? It's about power. So the laws are zero if you don't have power. How do you have power? Build a few nuclear weapons and then people will back the fuck off. See the woodchuck in North Korea? Exactly. Right. I'm not... How should I put it? If you can have a nuclear weapon, then I should be allowed to have one too. And if you prevent me from doing that, well, I will build it stealthily like others. All right, let's move on. All right, it says here, as the country forces kept up their campaign against the Iran-backed militant group. 9 people died in the center of Lebanese capital after an Israeli strike. They died. They were not killed. They died. All right. And it says here, an Israeli strike on a medical site affiliated with Hezbollah. Medical site, what does it mean? Hospital? Affiliated with Hezbollah, according to local authorities. This is a translation of these guys. The Israel Defense Forces said it killed 15 Hezbollah militants in an overnight airstrike on building used by the group in the town of and ordered civilians in some areas to leave immediately. How many civilians were killed? We don't know. Again, the Lebanese army said an Israeli strike against one of its posts in the south of the country killed a soldier. Israel said Wednesday 8 of its troops were killed in a battle against Hezbollah, its first casualties since starting a ground incursion, not invasion, incursion, earlier this week. All right, the Israeli government is yet to retaliate for Iran's barrage of missiles. So retaliate, self-defense right there. All right, it says here, which caused little damage and few casualties. I will show you few casualties right there. CCTV shows sole victim of Iran's missile attacks killed by falling rocket shrapnel. So the Telegraph gives us this bullshit that one person lost his life during the Iranian attack, who they claim more than 9% of their missiles reached their targets. So do you believe that it was only one? I don't. And not by a direct hit, but just by falling rocket shrapnel. That means it was hit in the air and just fell, and the poor guy became the victim. Let's go back to Bloomberg. Right. And it says here, Biden was asked if Israel should hold off from targeting Iran's nuclear facilities, something Tehran has long warned would provoke an aggressive response. The answer is no. Nobody will listen to Biden. You're already in it. Again, Israel sent troops into southern Lebanon. It's not an invasion. It's not a violation of any country's sovereignty. They just sent troops. Like the Indian government will send troops into Canada or the United States of America for those sheiks and others, right? It's going to be just an incursion. We're just going to send troops. Hundreds of Lebanese civilians have died. They just died in Israel airstrikes. They died. They were not killed, they were died. My God, man. The European Union announced it's increasing humanitarian aid for Lebanon 30 million euros or $33 million, which, means that they come with more than 100 million euros a year. How much do you give the other side? We're not talking millions, probably we're talking billions. In the meantime, you shoot down Iranian missiles to protect. Why not the Chinese shoot down Iranian missiles to protect? Because these guys are the vassals. All right, now we find out that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is pushing ahead with a campaign against Hezbollah. He's pushing ahead. The campaign, my friends. All right, Netanyahu has widespread support domestically for the ground and air offensive, not invasion, in Lebanon. Oh my God. All right, and the options, they say, they include targeting the OPEC members, which is Iran's oil infrastructure or military bases. Potentially the most extreme scenario, they get you ready for that one, would be an attack on its nuclear facilities, something called by former Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, among others. So you see, it has support for that. Israel has been fighting Hamas, backed by Iran, and considered a terrorist organization by the US. How about China? How they consider that one? Since the group invaded, now the right word, the country on October 7 last year. See, Bloomberg knows words. The group invaded, but these guys just, sent troops. Oh my God. Again, in an effort to reduce the tension, Saudi Arabia's foreign minister, Prince Faisal bin Farah, and Iranian President met in Qatar. Right, that's going to be discussed later. We discussed this garbage, big lie, I would say. I'm not for victims, obviously. I want the war to end, and I want a just peace. But that requires some people to give back what they've stolen. But that's not going to happen. Why? Because we got the guns. You don't have the right guns, which is, nukes. So in this case, they showed you one victim. I don't want any victims. But I saw footage of the Iranian attack. And I saw some hit in the air and some exploding on the ground. Now, if you think that only one person lost his life by the shrapnel, you can believe that as much as you want. I don't. All right, let's move on. We have Biden, who thinks that he is in charge, or at least these guys talk for him. Biden says Israel shouldn't strike Iranian nuclear sites, but US officials recognize it has a right to respond to attack. Who are the US officials? Who are this guy? Who's there? Where are you there? This is Jesus Christ, man. President Joe Biden is counseling Israel to take a proportional response to the week's barrage on Iranian ballistic missiles, voicing support to potential strike on Iran nuclear sites in the hopes of preventing the conflict that has erupted in the region from widening further. Opposition, so voicing opposition. American officials are not privately trying to persuade Israel to hold back on retaliating against Iran, two senior administration officials told CNN, a notable difference from April when Biden encouraged Israel to take the win following the successful interception. Why? Because right now we are involved. All right, no one's saying don't respond, one senior administration official said. No one's saying take the win. So who's that? Victoria Nuland or Mr. Blinken? Who are these officials? Appointed, not elected. Remember. All right, let's move on. Zelensky compares Western help for Israel and Ukraine. Here is the guy, yeah. What's up with that one with his little hand over there? What's up with that one? Huh? What's up, huh? Huh? Oh my God. And he's right. But what is he trying to do? He's trying the Western. You see, the Western is fighting for the same people. Do you realize that? Do you realize that the Westerners are fighting against one another for the same people? Remember the Second World War? Remember that one? All right, I hope you do. It's the same people. I'm not talking about the Ukrainians. I'm not calling those the same people. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Do you? Or don't you? We had a big problem if you don't know what I'm talking about here. So what's going on? Zelensky rightly points out that the baboon states will actively shoot Iranian missiles to defend Israel, but now they would not do the same thing for the Ukrainians. For the Ukrainians. I tell you what the big difference is. Russia has nuclear weapons, Iran doesn't. That's the biggest difference. There are some other differences as well. This is the biggest one. So what does this baboon want us to do? Us, the vassal states in this case of that particular entity. They want NATO states, the European states, to hit the European Russians' missiles over Ukraine for you. And then they fuck themselves again like in the Second World War for... Huh? Exactly. So remember, this is just a point. I'm not, oh yeah, they should do that. They should not do either. They should not do either. They should solve the problems differently. But when you're grabbed by the balls, by the entity, you're done. you know, by the eye of Sauron that I used to, terms I used to use before. The eye, if the eye of Sauron sees you, you're done, you're toast. And unfortunately, the Russians are in the eye of the Sauron, and Iran and everybody else who these guys designate as an enemy. Let's move to the next one. I said that these guys will do squat because only Iran does something. Gulf Cooperation Council affirms support. What the hell? For Lebanon. Okay, send troops. No, they were not going to do that. Just this kind of support, all right? While from the back, they're by others. You know who those others are? Calls for immediate ceasefire in Gaza. It won't happen until the entity will successfully accomplish all its goals with the help of the baboons Europeans. The Gulf Cooperation Council affirmed its support for Lebanon during such a critical stage. And you just, how do you support them? Blah, blah. And called for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza Strip. The council said later on Wednesday after holding an extraordinary ministerial meeting in Doha. The council also condemned the escalation of conflict in Lebanon and the occupied Palestinian territories, calling on all involved parties to exercise self-restraint and refrain from violence. It added in a statement. What I tell you, these guys will be like this. Don't hit us. You guys, no, don't hit us. That's exactly what these guys are doing. The only country that's not doing that is Iran. Iran, the Persians. My God. Who are these guys in the Gulf Cooperation Council? Right here. The states are Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and United Arab Emirates. And you have a beautiful map here. I'll see if I do like this. Excellent. Right there you have them. Saudi, Oman, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Bahrain, and Kuwait. These are the countries that say, hey, stop. We support you with our words. Or in a big scheme of things, here is the map. This country right here, this country right here, right there, this country right here. If you take any country from here, any except this one in blue, I think you remove it. Let's say Syria doesn't exist anymore. The war will still be there. If you take Iraq, the war will be there. Iran out, still the war will be, garbage will be here. But if you take one country out of this, let's say this doesn't exist anymore, you're not going to have the same garbage. And especially when you have the Al Capone grabbed by the balls by the eye of Sauron. What could happen? Things will escalate. Israel will hit targets in Iran. Iran will retaliate, and we'll see where they're going to escalate this garbage. The Americans and the other vassal states, unfortunately for the entity, will cooperate and will shoot down Iranian missiles. Now, I don't know if they're going to shoot direct targets in Iran, but if they do, Iran will hit our destroyers in the Mediterranean Sea. And if Iraq allows, there's another thing, if Iraq allows its airspace to be used like a whore by these guys to hit Iran, so Iraq allows that, Iran said, you are my enemy. That's great because these guys got together lately. So that's a fantastic way of separating them. Again, Syria, if they go over, because this part, an eastern part, is controlled by the United States of America. Jordan is already a vassal state of the entity and the United States of America, so most likely will go over Iraq. There's no other way. They're not going to go Saudi Arabia. They're going to go Jordan, Iraq, Iran, or they're going to go Syria, Iraq, Iran. Get ready, my friends. Go and buy your toilet paper again. Why? Because maybe you're going to need it to do what? Not even, you're not going to have time even to take a shit if things escalate. And when I say escalate, is with the Russians, Americans, and all these guys, with the zealots, with the crazies. Thank you very much for being with me again today. Stay strong, stay smart, look for the truth, and be just.